There we go.
Got it.
Whatever, if we say something wrong, it'll be saved forever.
That's
like
fair warning.
Like a Bob Woodward interview.
Yeah. Right.
So I'll just start with my adult beverage then, since I haven't touched it yet. So
Brandy
What
Manhattan.
is that?
a little bit of a rye Manhattan area. So I only did a single tonight though. It's last month was crazy. So what's funny, if when I got to the ship, my first commanding officer was Jim Tolbert there, and I didn't even know what, I didn't know anything about being on the ship, and I met the ship in North Shipco, Captain, and I don't know, the three plus years zipped by, but I burned out 3 commanding officers, I think. So
Well, I tried. I obviously failed.
Well, I had Commander Lear in the engineering space. Cheng was keeping an eye on me at first. Yeah, so Steve was my chief engineer, and he kept me out of trouble by never letting me above main deck. So, what I was going to say is I think we might lose. Dave is moving closer to his children. So Dave Holton, the president, might be on the road tonight, as well as I heard from Rich that Rich delayed his transition. Did he say he's going from Florida to Cleveland?
The other way.
Oh, good. I was going to say that seems to not make sense. So we might lose him too. Which is, then it's anarchy, right, Mark?
That's right.
So I know we still have a few more minutes, and we'll do an introduction once everybody's on board. I don't know what we've been averaging, 18 to 20 people, I think.
Yeah, about that.
Let me just take another sip. I just was told I need to let the microphone do the work. I might be yelling too loudly.
Much better.
Okay. So I would say they only keep me on the board so I can use my Zoom from Dartmouth College. I think it's.
Well, you figured that out already, huh?
I don't know. On average, at least 4 meetings a day on Zoom. I'm getting zoomed out. But we have a lot of real estate that is expensive office space that we don't use right now. I'm sure everybody's seeing that in different places, but
Yeah. You're still doing pretty much the same thing that you were doing with the, who was it, Sisters of Mercy?
just the portfolio grew 10 times when I got up here. But
Sure.
it's, running a real estate portfolio of commercial and residential space. But this week we brought in undergraduates. So the campus is in full crazy mode with students arriving, and we had a secret party that got broken up by the Tuck Business School this weekend. So 23 Tuck students got in trouble. So it's never good when the business school makes the news for having an illegal party during COVID-19. Now we're making progress. We've got a few people that haven't turned on cameras yet, but they'll get there.
You still have your Seattle T-shirt from when we ran from Rota, Spain to Norfolk, Virginia?
I have quite a few things still from the Seattle. I don't know if I have that T-shirt. That might have been the deployment. What year was that, Captain?
That was the second deployment.
Oh, then I was there. Okay, then I was on that one. Again, you could call you just call up engines ahead full. I would have just had the machinist mate turn the valve. I wouldn't have seen anything. Besides going from from the wardroom to main control was about the distance I would travel, I think. So we're making progress. That's already 16, right?
Yep, you got it.
All right.
Oh no, I'm not. No, I guess my math isn't good. They're 12. 4, 8,
okay.
12. We still even have a few more minutes.
Have you seen Steve Lear?
He recently got married, so I've been seeing pictures of him, but I haven't seen him since he left for a mine sweep, I think, and for commanding officer of a mine sweep.
Yeah, he did after he left the ship. Yep.
His wedding pictures looked excellent last year, and I think he's in a second tier bliss there of doing it all over again, kind of thing.
Yeah, I
So,
remember when his first wife, Deanne, passed away. Yeah, my first wife passed away in 2011.
oh, I'm sorry. The other members of the board that have just popped in, we're getting close to the time. So far, Captain Jim, I think you're our lone CO so far, but Craig should be making it here at some point.
So I was CO from 95 to 97.
Oh, I'm turning around. See, that's
Yeah, I was about to add that.
Yeah,
Steve,
Steve Firks, Firks. No, it's all right. You haven't met me before. So.
I haven't.
And you wouldn't recognize me anyway. I got a COVID hair thing going on here, so you wouldn't know me anyway. But
I got a little trim for the phone call today.
Well, I was finally able to get a haircut myself.
There you go. That's it. Where did that come from?
That's a good shot.
All right.
Hey, Captain, you're too young for Zumwalt's Navy.
You know, my first, I want to say second day at the Naval Academy, I just had shown up, was the day he took over, and they brought us all down there. I had no idea what a CNO was, but they brought us all down to Tecumseh Court when he was sworn in as the CNO. And Admiral Thomas Moorer,
Right.
I think, retired, predecessor to him. But I was there, yeah.
That's the power of Google there, Captain. That's how you find that stuff.
Okay, perfect.
Captain Firks, you relieved Captain Ross, correct? During
No,
the med, or no?
I relieved Captain Yank Rutherford.
Who was temporary after Captain Ross?
No,
Or no?
he wasn't temporary. He had a full tour. I'm not sure who he relieved. Yeah, I'm not sure who Rutherford relieved.
So did you come aboard after that 95 med or during the med?
Yeah, after the 95 med, there
Okay.
was a turnaround, and then during just sort of the middle of the workup cycle, right around the Thanksgiving week of 95, I arrived.
Okay.
Looks like Dan's trying to connect other people in.
I've got Craig on the line, so I'm trying to get one more in here before we get going.
Hey Joe, just don't shower when you're close.
We got a computer just booting up on the in the Jacksonville area. So if I'm Dan Jastinsky, the treasurer and of the Veterans Association, and I served pretty much 89 to 91 on board the USS Seattle, trying to get some introductions done. Not knowing which order, I'll just start with names on it. So Captain Firks, you're in my top left-hand corner, so I'll start there, and then I'll jump around to make sure everybody says hi. A quick introduction, where you are, what's going on, kind of thing.
Okay, yeah, so my name is oh, I'm in
Perfect
my
timing.
father-in-law's house. I don't know what's going on. So I live in Colorado Springs, Colorado, retired from the Navy in Colorado Springs probably 15 years ago. And but I'm now visiting my father-in-law in St. Louis, and been here a couple days and whatever. I'm fully retired. I left the Navy in 2004, and then I worked for the Missile Defense Agency in Colorado Springs for another, I don't know, 16, 17 years. And then I guess not that long because it's 2020, but 15 years, let's say. And now I'm fully retired.
Excellent. I think once we go through introductions, the past captains will get to share favorite and least favorite stories and that kind of thing, and get a Q&A from the shipmates.
Okay.
Jim, you're next on my list, so 2 captains in a row, Jim.
Yes, I retired in 1991, and I was on the Seattle from 88 to 90. And after retirement, I went and started a second career in education, and I was an education administrator for 19 years. And then I finally retired in 2010. And so I've been retired almost as long as I've been in now.
And where's home now, Jim?
The home is in Yardley, Pennsylvania, on the Delaware, across
Beautiful.
the river from Trenton.
Very nice. I will keep us moving. Larry, you're next to my picture. Larry Furlong,
Hi,
coming
guys.
down the back stretch.
Yeah, I was B division 93, 95. I got out, still wanted to do something on the water, so I got a job in Pennsylvania as a waterways conservation officer. I am now Lieutenant Colonel, second in charge of the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission. I live in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And Jim, I drove right past your house to Trenton the other day.
Oh boy. Yeah, the next time you'll have to stop in.
There you go.
As I said earlier, when I was on board with Jim, I was the boilers officer back then. But Chief Lewis was my, chief back then. On the next picture, Mark Giraldi. Mark's also on the board.
Hey, welcome everybody. Mark Giraldi. I was on the Seattle from 73 to 75. I was leading ET, and that was my last tour in the Navy. I was in the Navy from 69 to 75. Got out of the Navy and joined a medical device firm. And in fact, I lived in York, Pennsylvania for a couple of years, and my territory was the whole central Pennsylvania area. York, Harrisburg, Chambersburg, all of that area. And went back to Chicago and continued my career with the same firm for 32 years. And retired in, when did I retire? 07. And living here in lovely Punta Gorda, Florida.
Punta Gorda.
Punta Gorda. Welcome everybody.
Rubbing that in. Peter Leone is next.
Had to find the unmute button.
Mm-hmm.
I was on from around 70 to 73. Started out as a weapons officer and then ended up as the ops boss. Ended up after about 10 years getting out of the active duty and went in the reserves, and finally retired as an 06 in the reserves in 96. And went to work for Ford Motor Company immediately after I got out of the active duty Navy. Retired from the Ford Motor Company. And then, because I don't do retirement well, apparently, I went and started working for a company that became a Boeing subsidiary, making small drones, the UAVs that I really wish we'd had when we were in Vietnam. And I'm fully retired right now, living on my small ranch overlooking the Columbia River and Mount Hood in Washington State.
Beautiful.
Nice.
Thank you. Nice. And again, Q&A is going to pop in a minute, but we have a good crowd tonight. Roger, you're up.
Hi, my name's Shane Dowdney. I currently live outside of Augusta, Georgia in Thompson. I was a machinist mate on the Seattle in the aft engine room from 94 to 97. Messed around, did a little construction, worked for Home Depot for a while. And I am currently a middle school science teacher. And right now I am working my butt off in my 15th year. Because I'm going to tell you, I some days I feel like I'm in the Navy again working, because I'm pretty much from daylight till 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night. Right now it's rough.
The teaching profession is not a, it's not a 9 to 5, that's for sure. Having a teacher in the family.
Definitely.
Bradley.
Hi, I'm Brad Stenstrom. I was on the Seattle, actually TAD from the Detroit onto the Seattle when it came out of the yards in '92. Can you hear me?
Lucky man, I said.
Yeah. I was a good friend of Senior Chief Hetrick. I was also on the Suribachi, spent a little time on the Butte. I was actually on 4 ships. Spent 22 years in the Navy. And I'm actually the treasurer for the AOE Sailors Association as well. I live in Green Acres, Florida, and I'm retired from the Navy now as well. I try to keep pretty busy myself. And Rich Thome is a friend of mine as well.
Super. Well, glad you're here. Vic Helberg from the board is next.
Hello, everyone. Vic Helberg. I'm in Marshalltown, Iowa. I served aboard. I'm a plank owner. I served aboard from 69 to 71. I was a cook. I am now operating our family jewelry business, which is celebrating day before yesterday our 122nd birthday.
Wow.
4th generation.
You're keeping the roof on this time, right?
Yep.
Very good. All right, Donald Walls.
Yes, I served on from 93 to 95. I was a damage controlman first class. I got out of the Navy at 95, the weekend before they left on their 95 med. I live in Absecon, New Jersey, which is right outside of Atlantic City. So I was a Jersey boy when we were stationed up there in Sandy Hook area. But I worked 20 years in the casinos, and then I left the casinos about 5 years ago, and I'm still, working.
Very
Not
good.
ready to retire yet.
Barnard.
I'm Scott Barnard. I was on the Seattle from 93 to 97, electrician's mate second class. And I live in Bensalem, PA, which is about, 15, 20 minutes from Yardley, Jeff.
Yep, your neighbor.
Yep.
And almost serving at the same time. It would have been a close connection there. Bob Miller's up.
Yeah, hello. Now I was on the USS Seattle from 1970 to 1973. I had the captain's gig over those years with 3 different captains. And I'm retired 5 years ago. And I'm in Marshalltown, Iowa with Vic Helberg. So.
Well, we're glad everybody's safe after last month out there.
Thank you. Yeah.
I know damage is, fixable.
Yep.
Now that my first shipmate from my time on board, Mike Coleman, come on off of mute.
Hey guys, how you doing? Mike Coleman. I was on 88 to 91. Served under Captain Tolbert, Trafton and Honor. Got off active duty, went into the reserves, and retired last year as a captain in the Navy. 2018, sorry. Did a couple of deployments for the War on Terror. And currently I'm a contractor working for the FBI. Oh, and I live in Falls Church, Virginia.
Go figure. Close to headquarters. Another shipmate, Captain Ryer. 2 captains. I stayed a lieutenant. You guys kept getting promoted. Tom, come on in here.
How you doing? So Mike Coleman and I have about the same bio. In fact, we were on board exactly the same times, essentially. left active duty about the same time and saw each other a number of times in the reserves. So good to see you again, Mike. Also retired in 2018 as a captain after 30 years. Miss it every day. And my civilian job, I worked for PepsiCo for 23 years. I'm currently a finance director for our global finance team. I live in Newtown, Connecticut.
Oh, we're glad you guys are here from my time on board. So thanks for jumping on tonight. Phil, we got you. You got to lean down. There we go.
There you go.
Yes, welcome. I enjoyed the one we did last month very much, and this is also very good. After I retired from the Navy, I did a little instructing at a community college, but a year ago, my wife and I moved to beautiful Vermont. Lovely country.
Beautiful state. Thank you for being here again. I'm going to keep us moving to get going. Jerry. Hi, Captain.
Hey there, Jerry Hillwing here. I was a CEO of Seattle from January 1993 until September of 1994. Flew airplanes off of aircraft carriers long before that, and then had the opportunity to round out my career in the Navy as the Chief of Naval Personnel. After retiring from the Navy, I thought I was going to do something simple like become an independent contractor or something. But instead, I ended up in Pensacola as the president and CEO of the Naval Aviation Museum Foundation. And my wife, Charlie, says all I did was change my uniform, everything, same people, same sort of things. Did that until 2013, retired from that job. And then I've been working part-time for the University of West Florida as an advisor to the president on strategic initiatives. Retired from that job 2 weeks ago. That actually make that 10 days ago. So now I'm sort of, Charlie says it's time for you to get out and do something.
So retirement doesn't go well for anybody I see here.
I think it must run in this business.
And Craig is next to you on my screen, and he also never stops down in Jacksonville.
Craig Honor, I was the CEO of Seattle, appreciating Admiral Howing and following Will Trapton. I was trying to get Will on, but he wasn't here. I was also an aviator beforehand. And after I got out of the Navy, I was a technology guy and did technology for about 15 years and loved it. And now I'm retired, and I am successful at retirement. I'm doing exactly what I want, which is I play a lot of golf. I do some woodworking. I do Zoom with some of my shipmates and have a good time, and glad to see you all. It's also noteworthy that I see a couple of faces here, but they look a little bit older than the last time I remember Tom and Mike and Dan, but hey, that's the way it goes. Life changes.
Time's flying. Thanks, Craig, for everything. Felicia, welcome.
Yes. Hello. How are you?
Good, good. We're doing a quick introduction, and we're going to get into Q&A with the captains, but welcome aboard.
Thank you, thank you. Well, I was on board the Seattle from 1998 to 2002. I was SH3SW, and I continued on after Seattle to I went to Lackland Air Force Base for training to become MA and corrections officer, and then I ended up in the Washington Navy Yard in DC for my last 4 years. So I did a total of 8 years, a little over 8 years.
Well, welcome to the call. Thank you. I will keep us moving. I think that John is next, even though it says Mary on my screen, John.
Hey, Dan. Hey, so good. So John O'Farrell was aboard the Seattle from 1988 to 1991. And from there moved into the reserves, was on USS Belknap, 6th Fleet flagship, and then into MIU W-203, Mobile Inshore Warfare Unit 203.
Well, thanks for jumping on. I know you had a busy night tonight.
Yeah.
So appreciate you coming on board. Kirby.
Yes. I served from 94 to 97. I was a machinery repairman, one of the few. There was only 2 of us. Then after I got off of there, I moved to Seneca, PA, got married, and I'm currently a purchasing agent for a big company called Komatsu. They do mining and construction, and that's where I'm at currently.
Super. Thanks for being here. Joseph Wander.
Yeah, hello. Good evening. I served on board the Seattle from 76 to 80. Served under 3 COs, Malden, Snyder, and Belichick. Was in the ON division at the time. And I got out of the Navy in 82. And I've been retired for a couple of years from database management. Got into computers and enjoyed it. It's good to be here.
Thanks for joining us. Charlie.
Yeah, Charlie Tuma. I was on Seattle from 85 to 87. I was ops. Phil Rule was my XO. Retired from the Navy in 99. Became a government civilian. Still am a government civilian serving with Navy Information Warfare Systems Command out of San Diego. I'm assigned to the East Coast in Norfolk. Handle the East Coast TICOMs and sit at Nav I4 and do a lot of cyber stuff. So still active.
Thank you for being with us tonight. And this is our biggest count, I think, from all the calls. John is up. John Blathers.
Hi, my name's John Blathers. I was on board in 86 to 90. I was a bosun mate in 1st and RAS divisions. One of my old skippers is actually on the call, Jim Tolbert, as well as one of my old division officers, Mike Coleman. I got out of the Navy in 90, went back and finished college, went into the medical device industry as an electrical engineer and continued my education. So now I'm still in the medical device industry, and I'm also teaching electrical engineering at Northeastern University.
Excellent. I'm just up the road a little bit in New Hampshire. So I visit Boston where one of my daughters is all the time. So
there you go. I'm north of Boston. I'm about 10 miles north of Boston.
So the Dartmouth Zoom call is only because I work as the real estate director for the school, and it's easier to give people the join meeting and you just jump right in. So thank you for jumping on the call. We hope to do some good stories. I'll try and go in order. I took no notes, so I'm going to have to go with my memory on Jim. Was the 1990 would start with Jim as the first CO of this decade. This is our 3rd call. We started with calls from the commissioning up through into the 70s, then we did the 80s, and here we are in the 90s. Hopefully some fun memories of exciting deployments, Jim.
Yeah, well, we started out in North Shifco in a yard period, and that was pretty exciting. But I think the most exciting thing was as we came out of the yard period, we had an oppie, and as everybody knows, the oppies weren't much fun. They were a lot of work, but we turned out being successful, and that was a good thing for us. Our deployment took us into the Indian Ocean, and I can remember one trip we were in Singapore with the Carrier Battle Group, and we got a call. We were just enjoying ourselves like crazy, and then we get called out of port and sent up to the Middle East near the Straits, and that was the time when they had captured the colonel. I think it was an Army colonel, and they wound up killing him. But that was a sad moment for us. But it was certainly an exciting time for us in the Indian Ocean while we were there. As I remember, when we left Singapore, the only ship that could stay up with the aircraft carrier was the Seattle, and that we kind of enjoyed that. The destroyers were falling off the side, and we would have to go back and refuel them, and then go back up and join the aircraft carrier. I don't know if any of you remember those days, but it was a pretty exciting time. I really enjoyed my tour, but I enjoyed my tour most because of the people that that I had the opportunity to share duty with on Seattle. Just some outstanding folks. Some of you that are on this call, I can't say I recognize you all now, but back then we were all a lot younger.
I think there were a dozen ensigns came on board right before that Indian Ocean deployment. So you probably had more ensigns than you knew what to do with.
Yeah, and less hair.
So Captain Salford, I remember actually on that deployment when we went up with Lieutenant Colonel Higgins was his name, who was murdered by them. But part of that also is that after we went in off the coast of Beirut to provide support for the Army helicopters that were coming out of Crete to evacuate the embassy, and then be moving. Because I was actually coming on watch. It was about I was coming on the 4 to 8, and I show up in combat. And you were there, and I was like, well, what the hell's going on? The captain's here at 4 o'clock in the morning. And, you turned out, and I think it was Ensign Creed at the time, Andy Creed. I was relieving him, and you were in there, and I got the brief, and, we went in. You were giving the, I think, whoever we were reporting into, a capacity for sick bay beds and surgery and everything else, and capacity for a flight deck. And they flew a bunch of not Hueys, but Blackhawks out of Crete into Beirut, evacuated the embassy, and we provided cover for them as well. So it was quite exciting.
Yeah, that was, I didn't get much sleep during that time.
Yeah.
I thought that was the life of an ensign on board an AOE. It was not getting much sleep. I don't know if anybody, I did not leave any members of my division in Singapore when we had the sortie. I don't know if Mike or Tom or John, if any of our sailors were left on the shore, but there were a few shipmates that didn't make get the call.
If I remember correctly, didn't Mike you leave a suit or something there?
Oh my gosh, that's a good story.
Oh yeah, I did. I had a Singapore suit made. And I still fit in it, by the way, although it no longer works.
Good for you.
But yeah, we got sortied out of there, and I was like, oh crap! I just spent all this money on a suit, so I sent the guy a letter. And about 2 years later, I got this brown package, and I opened it up, and it was that suit. So they actually sent it to me. I was pretty impressed.
Nice.
That's awesome. I did forget about that. I on the next deployment, I remember going into Jeddah to get a carpet, and I did leave but not a suit. So as I recall, we had a bunch of inspectors on board, Jim. Not only the OPI, there was InServ or something, or was that afterwards? It seemed like we were constantly being inspected.
Yeah, well, we seemed to be like a magnet for inspectors, because they constantly were sending folks to us to either make sure we were doing it right or trying to catch us doing something wrong. But we treated them all the same. We smiled and shook our heads and thanked them when they left.
So were you the captain during Diego time? I'm losing track.
Yes, I was on when we crossed the equator.
So we don't have any stories that we can bring up Nick Gerace and the Officers Club because Nick's not here. But the time on Diego and the crossing the line ceremony was a fun experience for all of us that were polywogs at the time. That was a pretty good part of the deployment.
Yeah, I crossed the equator when I was an ensign, so I couldn't imagine it as a senior officer. But my captain, when I was an ensign, he was a submariner, and he had not been across the equator. And when we went across, he set me up. I was supposed to go first so I could go to the bridge and take the watch while he was going through the ceremony. But instead, he went first because there weren't many people that were had been across the equator. And then I was one of the last ones to go, and I got my butt beat pretty hard.
I just remember the last person we saw was Commander Sepulveda. I don't know if anybody else remembers the final indignity to get by
Yeah.
Sepulveda. That was
That
enough.
was nasty.
You had to eat a olive out of his belly button, if I
Oh,
recall
yeah.
correctly.
Covered in lard.
So it was, and we won't even talk about any other stories, Mike, that I still have pictures of.
Dan, if anybody's curious, I actually have a video that I made onto a DVD of that ceremony.
I think we're very interested in it.
So if anybody wants a copy, just shoot me an email.
God, I will send you a note.
Okay.
Dan, I think we could post that on the website. What do you think?
I think it was quite a day or a couple of day experience for us. So lots of fun memories. Not being a person with a mustache, I had to shave part of my leg, but the guys that shaved half a mustache, that was pretty tough. So any other questions for Jim? All right.
So
Now-
really, Captain Talbert, do you remember a story you were telling me about? I guess as a JO, you were cross-decked to a Greek destroyer or something like that, or a Turkish destroyer, and you picked up some foul language apparently that you could yell at sailors with.
That, ironically, the sailor language was all the Greek I could remember. I spent a lot of time trying to learn Greek, but when I actually joined them, I was an exchange midshipman from the Naval Academy, and I attended the Greek Naval Academy. And when I got there, I was all prepared to speak what little Greek I learned, but they wanted to speak English because they got graded for it. I didn't get graded for it, so we finally settled on they would ask me questions in Greek, and I would answer in English. And it was a fun time with the Greeks.
Very good.
If I recall correctly, John Blathers speaks Greek or spoke it pretty well at the time, and we pulled into Suda Bay, and he was the guy that we would send down to deal with everything because he could speak the language and sort of took care of everything for us.
You are correct, Mike.
Why, I tell you, Mike, you got a memory like a shark. That's great. But that did help us a lot. When you can speak the language, you can get away with a few things.
Absolutely. I remember we going into Crete on Liberty, people would want me to go out with them into the town so they wouldn't get ripped off in stores, because the Greeks in Crete were notorious for that.
Oh, yeah.
So if we fast forward in time, change of command, it would have gone to Craig next.
Right. So during my 2 years, we never really made a full deployment. We did a bunch of drug interdiction ops down in the Caribbean. We did go over to Europe one time for a 90-day cruise with America Battle Group. And I had put in a request to go down the river to Bremerhaven. And the Second Fleet came back to us and said, "Oh, you can't do that. You got all this ordnance and stuff." And I kindly called the chief of staff, who was a friend of mine, and reminded them that Bremerhaven was right across the river from Nordheim, which is the biggest ammunition manufacturing plant in Europe. And so they finally approved us to go to Germany, which was a real treat to go down the river to Bremerhaven. We hosted the Germans there, and we set up a flight deck picnic type affair where we built little booths, sort of like the Peanuts cartoons, and we had a hot dog stand, and we had a beer stand because we could serve alcohol there. We had a hamburger stand, and the Germans loved it, and the sailors loved it, and I'm pretty sure not all the beer made it back down in the locker, but it was a good time for everybody. But that was one experience. We also went down into the Caribbean. We delivered some supplies to Caracas one time, We also got an emergency call one time, and there was some event that happened in the Mediterranean. There was an amphibious group that was supposed to go down to Barbados and celebrate their 25th anniversary. But the amphibious group got called off to Nicaragua or somewhere. And so we got this call on the phone saying, hey, Seattle, you got to go down to Barbados. And so we started doing the liaison, and what they wanted was a marching unit to march in their parade. And the British were putting it on, and the marching unit had to be able to do normal march and then slow time march. I don't know if you've ever seen the Brits do slow time march. Well, you've probably never seen Americans do slow time march for any of us. But we managed to kind of get through it. I think the only way I could get enough volunteers to do the marching parade was to offer the guys that were on restriction opportunity to march in the parade and a little bit of slow return back to the ship after restriction. But we also spent some time in Philadelphia in the shipyard, and that was quite a challenge because they were decommissioning the 2 battleships there. They had 2 aircraft carriers there, and we were the 5th wheel on the cog, and they had several other people. They had also already announced that the Philadelphia shipyard was closing, and so the shipyard's goal was to keep us there as long as possible. Our sister ship, Seattle, or excuse me, Detroit, had just come out of the yards. They had gone in for 3 months, and I think they came out a year later. And so we managed to get out on time, but it was quite a struggle. We didn't get a lot done. We got a lot done, but there was a lot that was not done also. And so we were successful in getting out and returning the ship to service, but it was pretty hard. It was also interesting. We had that was the time in the Navy when recruiting was wacko. They were recruiting people out of high school to come and join the Navy, and they were doing 2- and 3-year enlistments. And so what you'd have is you'd have a sailor that would go to boot camp, and they'd report on board, and they'd typically go to the laundry or the mess cook or whatever, and he'd end up, during his 90 days there. And by the time he'd gone through boot camp and done that, he only had a year left in the Navy, and you had a bunch of sailors who were never going to make rate or even probably make do anything in the Navy. And it was a pretty trying time because we had a bunch of sailors that weren't all that interested and weren't destined for success. So that was a little bit difficult too. But it was a good time. I came aboard initially on Highline. I held my breath coming across, but I figured, if they dunked the captain coming aboard, there was going to be hell to pay. So I stayed dry coming aboard. And I was especially careful not to Highline off because then it doesn't matter.
So you know that all of us, the JOs on board the ship, will only remember the Dependence cruise, or fondly remember the Dependence cruise.
Yes, we had.
I know that got talked about last month, but it's an honorable mention of stories of all time.
So why don't you tell your story to Dependence cruise? I've told it enough.
Well, we were up in New Jersey, and Captain said I need to go down and talk to the squadron, and so I got an opportunity to travel for a day with Craig, and he brought me, and I got to be up front close to an F-14 for the first time. They don't really let sailors get there, so he organized that they were going to come by and on a weekend deployment training mission, they'd fly by, and we'd have a good opportunity for Dependence to see the F-14s up close. Little did we know they got very close. So then it goes to how they were going to fly by. I'll leave that to you, Craig.
And so they came by and they made 2 passes. The first pass, I was disappointed. They were like 1,000 feet out, couldn't hardly see them. Of course, the weather was pretty bad too. I mean, it was blocks off when we left. I mean, it was clouds low. You couldn't hardly see much past the bow. We're in the fog going out. And when we got outside the 25-mile limit where airplanes can go a little bit faster, it cleared up a little bit, but they were still, we had low ceilings, and they came down, they were going to do a high-speed pass, and they kind of missed the ship. And I was thinking, yeah, these bozos. But they said, oh, we got enough gas to try it one more time. And so our chief OSC, Cooney, I don't know if anybody remembers Robert Cooney, but he said, yeah, come on back in. He didn't tell me right away. And next thing I know, these two F-14s come in, they're at flight deck level, and they're just above the number supersonic. And of course, we got the grills all set up on the fantail. We've got the 3 hangar bay doors about halfway down. On the inside of the hangar, we're showing movies for the kids. And they came by, and the damage was pretty significant when the supersonic boom hit. It was like somebody took a 20-foot beach ball and threw it right into each of the hangar doors, and they blew in such that they were inoperative. And they blew out about 75% of winch grooves, had damaged the plexiglass, and it was a little bit more than we had bargained for. And so Dan and a couple of the others going to get deep trouble, deep doo-doo for this. But it turns out that I had protected the 6 a little bit, and that there are some required training events that a ship has to go through. And one of those is protection from supersonic threats. And so you're supposed to have supersonic targets come in and attack you. And we had CIC manned, and we were tracking, and we were doing the full drills exactly as they were specified to defend against supersonic targets. So when I got the eventual call, what in the hell are you doing there, Honor? It was like, hey, here's the instruction. Here's what you tell me to do, boss. And so I wasn't talking to boss, of course, but I was talking to the ops officer down at the serve group, and he said, okay, we understand. And that was kind of the end of that. But we did have to go back in and get some damage repairs done. But it was pretty exciting. The defendants all loved it. We also, in that same event, got a distress call from the Coast Guard. There was a fishing boat that was in the water, and they were screaming for help. And so we pulled up alongside them, came out of the fog. You can imagine this 30-foot fishing boat with 3 people on it. And all of a sudden, this big giant Seattle pulls up kind of alongside them. And as we're pulling alongside, we got all the defendants there. And so I'm talking to the defendants, oh, we're going to go rescue this boat. And we got these problems and this sort of thing. I said, okay, everybody go over the port side. When we see them, I want everybody to wave at them and yell. And so sure enough, we come alongside, hear these guys dead in the water because they ran out of gas. This big ship comes up, and 1,200 people on the wave going, ah! So we launched the boat and gave them a couple of cans of gas, and they were able to get out of there. It was fun.
You counted that as an unrep, I hope.
Yeah, that was another.
So the only thing that occurred in between those 2 commanding officers was Desert Shield, Desert Storm. We'll have to do that another time. But
30 years ago.
Yeah, Brad, jump in.
Yeah, just Captain, this is something that I wanted to bring up, a memory, because when you came into the yards there, I came over from the Detroit to spend a little time on the Seattle, because since the Seattle was coming out of the yards and the Detroit was coming in, I was a PC-1 at the time. And when the ship came out to sea, it was going to go out and do some sea trials and then go down to Norfolk. So when we went out to sea, one of the things that we had a little bit of fun with was some of the new guys that were on the ship that had come on while it was in the yard period. We wanted to show them about mail buoy watch, which, guys that hadn't learned about the mail buoy watch, we got to do that with them.
This is a hard
fun with it. Remember about the mail buoy watch?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So since I was a PC-1, these guys hadn't heard about that yet. So we got to dress them up with a K-Pot life jacket, some sound-powered phones, and the bow hook. And it was one of the last times that I'd been out to sea where we actually got to do that with the guys. So we had some fun with that. And then when we got down in Norfolk, and I went back into Norfolk. That was actually the last time I went to sea, because after that I was sure duty the rest of my time before I retired. But before we actually left the yards, the New Jersey, the Iowa, and the Missouri were all tied up in the yards there, and I took some pictures of it, which I'm still trying to find those pictures, because since then those 3 ships have not been together. They're scattered around all over the planet. But I did enjoy my time when I was on the ship, though. I had a great time.
So to get a hold of Jason Minix, he was our photographer. He might have some pictures of those ships, because he took a zillion pictures of Seattle and has got them all in his home there in Texas.
Who was that again?
Jason Minix. He's the ESPN2 announcer, sports announcer in San Antonio, Texas. He's a Seattle Veterans Association member, Jason Minix.
Okay, thanks, Captain. I'll check that out.
His
I
pictures.
was doing this, but if I didn't make a memory, we did lose. I mean, we lost several shipmates while I was in command, but the one that was most heartbreaking was BM2 John Potter. We lost John Potter at sea, out in the North Sea. We were doing some. The bosun mates were trying to clean a messenger line, and they had to drag it off the tail end, and he got tangled up to it and got dragged in a chock and went overboard. And so from time to time, well, a lot of the times I think about it, but he was a star and he was a good guy, and it was a shame, but that's life at sea.
When the veterans group got together in DC, most of us got to the where his marker is at the cemetery. We have 2 shipmates from our time there that were lost at sea and are in memorial there. Tough event. That tragedy was a tough one for everybody.
And later, moving on.
Yeah.
I often tell people they don't really realize how dangerous a ship at sea can be unless you've ever actually served on one, because people think it's cool and all that, but then you realize after you've served on it, just with Potter and the Hilo crash and Desert Storm, all that kind of stuff, it's just one of those things. It's a pretty dangerous job just because of all the equipment. It's old and has to constantly be upgraded and maintained.
There's like, the danger at sea bit. We were coming home from Captain Tolbert, your deployment in the North Sea, and we hit the hurricane before we got to Halifax. And that hurricane actually snapped the chains on the fork truck, or at least one fork truck up forward. And I've never seen a fork truck get thrown around like it was a tennis ball. It was just bouncing around in those things, and they had the whole side secured to go up the other side to get to the bridge. But it was something else to see that fork truck get thrown around.
Yeah, that was Hurricane Hall, as I recall. And we wound up getting diverted to Halifax, and the carrier battle group went into Halifax, and they wouldn't let us go in because of AE that had blown up in Halifax and destroyed most of the city during WW2. But we wound up in, I think it was San Rodrigo Bay, which was a huge bay next to Halifax, and we had such a great time there because all the families invited us out and to have dinner at their homes. So it was turned out to be a good thing. We didn't get to see the big city of Halifax, but we got to see some very wonderful Canadian people.
Those of us serving on the bridge during the transit were never happier than for being on the Seattle than being on any of the other small boys out there. They were being tossed around. I don't know how sick I would have been had I been on any other ship but the carrier or the Seattle.
We were taking whitewater on the bridge.
On the bridge.
You could hear the whitewater hitting the bulkhead in combat.
It was the roughest seas we've ever had.
Oh, it's crazy.
My first ship was a FFG that I commissioned out of Seattle, and we were coming out of the Straits of Seattle, and I had the late watch, and I was walking up the side of the ship and running back down to catch myself when the twisting and turning. It ain't fun on a small boy.
No, I get the power of the sea. To keep us moving, I'm going to go with, I think, Captain Burks would have been. Are we going in order? Did I mess that up?
I followed Jerry Hoeing here. I followed Craig Honor. You know,
Sorry,
had the
Admiral.
honor of following Craig. I have a couple stories that I enjoy. One of them, having Jim Tolbert talk about his OPI. I had the honor of being CEO through 3 OPIs.
Oh boy.
And an LOE. So those guys became regular members of our crew, it seemed like. You know, now the good news is we passed of the 2 OPI, or of the 3 OPIs and the LOE, we passed 2 of the OPIs and 1 of the LOEs. So we had one problem with an OPI, but we had the opportunity to do it again and then join our friends with the Roosevelt Battle Group. And one of our shipmates there said that he went from Seattle, maybe something in between, and went on to Belknap, which reminds me of a little incident, opportunity we had in the Mediterranean during our deployment with the Roosevelt Battle Group. It was our turn, our time to be able to do a NATO Sea Sparrow missile shoot. And of course, with all that training, with the supersonic targets that Captain Honor had, we were looking forward to having the opportunity to actually shoot a missile. But the Belknap was in that missile shoot also. And our role was to let the Belknap shoot, and then if they missed it, then we would have an opportunity to have a shot at it. So the drone comes in, the Belknap can't get their radars to lock on it, so they turn the drone out, turn it back in again. Belknap can't get it to lock up. They do it again. This time they get a lockup, but the missile wouldn't fire. So we had the opportunity to launch our NATO Sea Sparrow at that drone. We got a direct hit on it, and nothing more fun than sending to the to the CO of the fleet, the fleet commander's ship, a little note that says, "Don't worry, Seattle will have your air cover from this point on," or something like that. Anyway, it was a great day, and somewhere I have a little piece of the wires or something that armed that missile when we launched at it. So that was a good time, and we had a great time doing that. Another thing that I remember from the Med Cruise was, when our first opportunity to do an underway with the Roosevelt, we were in the Ionian Sea. That was during the Bosnia-Herzegovina timeframe, and we thought that we would do this thing right and provide full service. So the first helicopter went over, and it had a bunch of bosun mates, and it had some MSs on there, and we had the PCs. It was a total crew effort, and we went over there and we washed the windows on their bridge and on the flag bridge. We gave the admiral and the captain a little meal and a cake. They went down and checked the oil and the nuclear spaces and the engineering spaces. So we had a good time on that. That was similar to the time where, Jim, you mentioned the opportunity to use the speed associated with an AOE. There was a F-14. We were getting ready to have the Roosevelt make its approach. So they were, right behind us, and an F-14 had to come in and do an emergency landing. So they had to do pull forward, and then they turn, and the CO of the Roosevelt says, "Well, we'll just schedule this and do it tomorrow." He says, "Because light winds, I'm going to have to go at 28, 30 knots in the opposite direction. We'll never get together again." And I said, "No, I'll go with you." So we turned, we stayed there just about a mile in trail of them until they captured that F-14. We did a turn, they were in perfect position, and we only lost 30 or 40 minutes of time. And it was I just want to close with saying, I've been on a lot of ships. I spent a lot of time in the Navy, 35 years. I've never seen a harder working crew than the crew on USS Seattle. It's just such an honor to work with all of you and all those young men and women. We brought women on board during my time frame, and it was just an outstanding bunch and something I'll cherish forever.
Sir, I love you talking about the speed of the Seattle. And if I recall, and I'm not sure which captain was the CO, but we were down in Gitmo, and we were going out to sea, and I think we were going up against the San Jacinto, and they started speeding up, and we started speeding up, and so the bridge to bridge was kind of hey, do you want to have a race? And so they were getting ahead of us because, you know, they had those engines, but they didn't realize that we could get up to 34 knots. And so the Seattle eventually caught up to them and passed them, and they were really shocked at how fast the ship was.
Play the long game.
Yeah, I remember that one very well.
There was a time too when there was an FFG alongside, and she was supposed to break away. And I think on the Gulf War deployment, but we wouldn't let her break away. We just kept the speed up, and she couldn't zoom in front of us to turn. We just kept on going. It was great.
There was another exercise we had to do, all engines astern, full speed run. And it was, you know, the craziest wake I've ever seen. Was that an in-serve or an oppie?
That was an in-serve, and we had to test full backing power. We only had 3 boilers on the line, and so all we could do was 17 knots astern, which was causing quite a bit for the helmsman to be able to think in terms of steering astern as we're backing down. And we had to clear the port fantail guy because the watch there, because the wake was coming up over the fantail at 17 knots. It was pretty impressive.
I don't know if anybody else remembers. It was a scary run because it was quite impressive of the wash coming over the stern. But the things they make us do for drills that I'm glad we never had to do on, you know, in a real need. So that any other questions from that deployment? Because that's after we
I
left.
just have one comment for Captain Hoeing. I don't know if you remember me, but you used to come down to my old repair office for a cup of coffee, and we were in Cuba doing all our training. We had a heck of a time setting yoke. And you go, DC-1, what do you need from me? I said, well, I need people to fix this thing. And you gave me everybody that was on restriction, anybody at EMI, and the next time we went through it, we passed with flying colors. I have to say, after I spent 12 years in the Navy, and by far, you were the best CO I ever had as an enlisted person. Absolutely. Wow. I never got a chance to say that to you because you then had to change your command, and then I got out of the service shortly after that. But you were absolutely my best CO I ever had in 5 duty stations.
Wow. Well,
just wanted to tell you that.
Thank you very much. My face is red here now.
That's good.
Hey, good morning, everyone, or good evening to where you're at. I apologize. My name is Anthony Falk. I just joined the call. Actually, I'm here living and working in Japan, so I was in another meeting prior to this, and I really wanted to join, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but so I was on board the Seattle from roughly October of '89 until April of '91 was my first tour, is when I joined the Navy, actually in June of '89. And,
what division, Anthony?
Well, I started off as an undesignated deck seaman in 1st Division, and then struck out at the time to become an SH. Mess cranking is the derogatory term now, but my food service attendant days, you had an option, either the mess decks or you could work down in the laundry. So luckily I was able to work down in the laundry room, but so I just retired from the Navy after almost 30 years. I just retired in December of 2018, and now I'm a civil servant here in Yokosuka, Japan. But a lot of memories. You know, I read the posts and you know, on the page, and of course, being my first ship. But definitely a lot of memories. Of course, I was on board for the whole Desert Shield, Desert Storm deployment and support. I think as far as I saw the invitation list, and I see that Captain Honor is part of this group, but I think he's the one I remember most, you know, considering our Desert Shield, Desert Storm deployment.
Who was your division officer back then?
First division, I really can't remember, but back in when I went to
Salt, Lee Salt.
Well, no, Salt at the time, Lieutenant J.G. Salt at the time he was working as the ship's legal officer.
Right, okay.
He had a legal PO3, a guy named William Green.
Somebody doing all the work.
I became close with. Possibly, I just you know I remember a lot of memories. I could go on for days about my first tour there. But the port visits to Haifa, the repeated port visits to Jeddah, you know, and support, and constantly up and down and through the canal multiple times in support of that mission.
So I think I opened up the cruise book, and I think I can come across your picture in it in S3. It looks like Folk.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, I think I got you there. So welcome from Japan, though. That's pretty. I think you're going to win the distance of the call.
Well, I was pretty excited. Of course, I watch the threads. I'm not very active on the page, but and I try to do what I can to, you know, see people. But I'm sure, as you know, life is definitely busy. But it's always nice to reminisce. And unfortunately, I've been overseas for the past 11 years while on active duty, and then for the last almost 2 years as a retiree. And I always, you know, desired, you know, in the most recent, as we get older, you know, things bring different feelings. But, you know, I have a lot of memorabilia, especially being an N3 or S3 rather. I'm in N3 now. Being an S3, all the emblematics, things like that. But just for a story for the group, while on active duty, sometime around early 2000, my parents, and I'm from Virginia Beach originally. I did my first 20 years in the Navy, stayed in Virginia, shipshore, and then moved to Italy, and then finally retired in Japan. But I grew up in Virginia Beach. My ship, of course, the Seattle, was stationed in the Norfolk time before the home port switch up to Earl. But my father and mother bought a house, and there was a couple boxes left in the attic. And ironically, in one of those boxes was the commissioning booklet for the Seattle, if you can believe that. So I have a ton of stuff that I wanted to donate, but I've had in storage, Navy storage, for 10 years. And then that, of course, once I retired, I had to turn it all over, and I have it in storage back in the States. But I'm going to retire permanently here in the next 3 years. And when I get back, I'll make sure I make contact and get those items over to the museum of those POCs.
Well, thank you. I think Rich Toma will be very happy to gather anything that memorabilia and pull it together. He's kind of the historian of the group,
right?
And we're recording this so we can put it out on the USS Seattle Veterans Association page. So
awesome,
welcome.
Awesome.
We had gone through.
I have.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was saying I have a gazillion pictures and different types of emblematic stuff, you know, coming up in S3. But the two main things that really came to mind that I wanted to bring up were some incidences that one was a question I want to know what happened, and two, just to reflect. So, of course, we all remember Mr. Potter and the situation that happened with that. And my recollection of that was, you know, I was in S3 at the time, but my recollection of that is we were steaming at a certain speed, and that division got permission to, you know, trail some small stuff for cleaning of those cotton lines. And then I guess the word never got back to the fantail that, you know, we were picking up speed, and that line began to run, and Potter himself tried to step on the line to stop it or catch it, and of course got tangled and actually got pulled through that closed chalk on the stern, on the fantail. But what was vivid about that for me was when I believe it was Captain Honor, you know, came over the 1MC and directed everybody to man the rail. We were in the North Atlantic. It was super, super cold, if everybody remembers that. But one thing I remember was, and I couldn't believe, and even still to this day after 30 some years later, is that we had shipmates on that ship at that time that it was sometime prior to the whistle for lunch, and we had shipmates coming off the rails after being directed to by the skipper to go out and get in the chow line. And from what I understood at the time, as you know, SK3 Folk or SN Seaman, whatever. But I remember Captain Honor coming over the one embassy and said if he found anybody within the skin of the ship, it was going to be Captain's Mast on the spot. So basically, you know, we were manning the rails at that time. We had already determined that, you know, the stay time in the water was X, and that we were at that time just looking for a body. And then I just couldn't believe that. And if anybody else remembers, during that time when we were looking for Mr. Potter, there was actually a pod of orca whales that had came up near the boat. You know, everybody and their uncle was throwing, you know, dye markers in the water. So does everybody remember that as I recall it?
I'll leave it for others on the distant memory. I don't have a recollection of any orders over the 1MC. John, Mike.
So I can add a little bit to that because it was a terrible event. And there's a JAG investigation. You go back and you research it and you can find it. There was some issues associated with it. We were making high speed. We were doing 22 knots, and we were on a transit, and we'd been doing 22 knots for quite some time. And at 22 knots, you're creating a pretty big wake. And unbeknownst to the bridge, the deck department had decided that they were going to clean a messenger line by dragging it over the fantail, which should have never been done at 22 knots. And the way they did that, they wrapped it around that big capstan on the fantail, and they would let half of it out and half of it out, and they let a little bit more out than they should, and it started slipping. And Potter, BM2 Potter, he was a hard charge. He was a great guy, and he tried to step on it. The first class boatswain mate that was running the show told him to back off, and he didn't. And he stepped on it again. The boatswain mate hollered at him to back off it again, and he didn't. And at that time, the messenger line picked up speed, paying out because the friction on the capstan was not very good. And he stepped on it a third time, and that's when it wrapped around his leg and drug him to the chock. And you know, those chocks were not very big. There's no way for a human body to go through that chock at a high speed rate and survive in reality. And we knew exactly where we went overboard. There was a smoke dropped exactly where we went overboard. And so you're right, we were searching for remains, but quite frankly, with a messenger, which was very heavy because it was soaked with oil, it no doubt drug him down. We launched the gig and the officer's boat and the two motor whaleboats, and we searched for, I don't remember the exact time, we searched for about 4 hours in the vicinity of the smoke where he went in. And so we knew where he was and what happened, and unfortunately we couldn't find him. It's true, we had everybody, all hands on deck, did direct crew come up to everybody take a look. And in retrospect, I'm not sure that was a great idea, but I thought it was a good idea at the time, because unfortunately the seas were not heavy enough to cause ripples or waves. I mean, we had swells, but in that particular area there were seaweed, and there were balls of seaweed.
That's what I remember.
About the size of a head, and they were floating about 2 or 3 feet underneath the surface. And so about every 2 minutes we'd get a report from someone on the deck who saw a head floating in the water, and would dispatch a boat over. And so we went through, 2-3 hours chasing down seaweed balls that didn't prove fruitful. So it was a terrible situation, and I contacted the Potter's parents, and they weren't very happy, obviously, and it was just terrible. Nothing else.
Yeah, it was horrible.
Hard charging guy that was trying to do a good job and just didn't quite do it.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Hey, Skipper, if you can humor me with one more item, if you can. So after home port shift up,
Now we got something better.
say again.
So that wasn't very humorous, but go ahead.
No, no, sir. No, sir. Not again. You're right. You're right. After the home port shift up to Earl, there was a family day or dependent cruise scheduled. And for whatever reason that I can't remember, I did not attend it. And I remember being on the pier when the ship returned and saw, and I never really got the whole story, to be honest with you, but saw that, the hangar bay doors blown in and rig station windows blown out. And the word I got was, a flyby was scheduled and they got too low or went too fast and created that sonic boom, which did that.
I'll tell you what, we just talked about that a little while ago. It was pretty funny. Let me give you a telephone number. Why don't you call me and I'll give you the details on it, okay?
Okay.
And 904-673-1932, because I've already talked to everybody here and we'll just be repeating everything.
Okay, no problem. No problem. No problem
Anthony,
at all.
the other
No
thing
problem
is,
at all.
this will be also taped.
I'll go through the details with you, okay?
You'll
Yes,
also
sir.
be able to see this anytime, Anthony. By tomorrow night, this should be on the website at USS Seattle Veterans Association.
Or if you don't want to call, you want
Okay.
to watch it on the replay, that's
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, continue with the thinking about other questions that come up. I tried to go in order and I messed it up. I think Steve was next on the commanding officers.
Okay, let me see if can you hear me now?
Lima Charlie.
There we go. Okay. Yeah, so a couple of things that have been mentioned already kind of struck a bell with me. Very similar things happened to me. I had an OPI issue. It was called eCert at the time that I went through Seattle. I took command on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving in '95, and the following week was our engineering certification. And so we had the board out for that thing, and there's some question, they come out and before they will let you run any drills, you have to prove that all the machinery is operating properly. And so there was some question about whether one of our turbine generators had sufficient rotor thickness, I guess, and I recall an RPI. I'm not a mechanic, but a rotor position indicator or something like that. You push it in with your thumb, and if it pushes down and then the little plunger comes and touches the edge of the rotor itself that's spinning, or there's some question about whether or not that thing was bottoming out, and did we actually have sufficient engagement of the shaft of the turbine generator with the bearing. Anyway, so that took 5-6 hours to resolve, and which was supposed to be part, the engineering certification itself going on. And by the time that was resolved, it was done. The certification was done by the insert board. By the time that was done, then they finally agreed about 1 o'clock in the afternoon that, yeah, you're good to go. That's safe. But their cert ran until about 10 or 11 o'clock at night when it was supposed to be done finished in daytime. Well, we couldn't helo them off because you can't helo passengers at night. And these guys all had an in-serve or something the following morning. So we agreed to put them onto the captain's gig, and the gig crew with our bosun was going to drive them in from somewhere out by Chesapeake Light, which is a long run. Luckily, the seas were flat, but it was a long run, and they wanted to go into Lynnhaven Inlet, if anybody's familiar with that, Virginia Beach people. Well, make a long story short, the ship bosun ran the captain's gig on a sandbar at about midnight, and I got a phone call from him, a cell phone. We had cell phones then, right? So I had a cell phone call from him explaining me what was going on. And I did remember the last comment I made when the eCert board got on, they had a captain with them. Last thing I said to him, and I was kidding, but last thing I said was, "You are the senior man." So luckily, probably 2 or 3 hours later, some tanker came down the transit lane out of Norfolk, and that little swell lifted the gig up off of the sandbar, and they were able to, probably about 6 a.m. they were able to get these guys into the pilot station at Lynnhaven Inlet, and the gig came back. But anyway, that was my Oppie story. I have a very similar story as Admiral Hoeing on Sea Sparrow. We were doing down off Puerto Rico. We were having a big missile shoot day for the entire battle group, and we were doing these really destroyer type drills. You know, we would have like DDGs and cruisers and Seattle in a line, and we would do a line astern and then a split line astern and all this kind of stuff, and then we were supposed to do 180-degree turns. Well, I'm thinking the destroyers are using 15 or 20 degrees of rudder. We were having to use a hard rudder and drag a screw and all that kind of stuff to try to get the ship to spin at the same rate as a DDG or a DD would turn around. Well, anyway, when it came time for the missile shoot, it was set up so that everybody with a Sea Sparrow, which was the DDs and Seattle, would take a shot at once. And Seattle, we were the only ones to get a shot off and also hit. So we had our day in the sun there as well. Had a interesting thing happen, and this was in the summer of 1995. We're doing a real early unrep with George Washington, and I was sitting on the port bridge wing. We were unrepping about 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. And we're also doing a vert rep. We had an H-46 det on board, and so we're doing a vert rep same time. And I'm sitting there, and I just noticed that the strobe light underneath the helicopter, which was a red strobe light, all of a sudden was a white strobe light. I mean, well, how the heck's that happen? You know, that you can't, there's no selection to make it one or the other. Well, it turns out they had hit the water. They had lost an engine. The H-46 had hit the water. It had torn the cover off of that red strobe light. So the thing that was left was the bulb itself, I guess. And they were able to stagger, slowly pick up some literally headway in the water until they got enough speed going with the helicopter that they could get it airborne and single engine, and then land it over on George Washington. And all this happened while I was just wondering, why is it a white strobe light? They were struggling literally for their lives. And I can't remember the two pilots' names. There's two Lieutenant JGs in the cockpit in the front, but I remember the guy in the back was EM3 Smoking Gun, and his name has stuck with me, but the two pilots not. But anyway, they all survived, and so it turned out to be kind of a scary moment, especially for them. It was all the scary stuff was over by the time I knew what was going on. I also have a speed story. So we were on our deployment to the Med, supposed to be a Med deployment from the fall of '96 to the from the fall of '96 to the spring of '97. And then we had about a 2 or 3 week stint over in the Arabian Gulf planned for that deployment. Well, no sooner had we gotten to the Med than another one of these political deals. I guess, as I recall, Saddam Hussein had 2 sons who went away, defected from the country, and then they came back. And as soon as they got back, he had them whacked. And so there was big concern about something going to come of that. So they had the George Washington Battle Group, which we were a part of, steam immediately from the Med through the Arabian Gulf, and all the way around. And I can remember my battle group commander then was Admiral Mike Mullen. I was later the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Just a wonderful man, a great leader, and I really enjoyed working for him. But it was interesting because through this transit to the Arabian Gulf, GW had a day-long head start on us because they were further east in the Med when this word came out to get to the Gulf. And I just had conflicting reports to me from the 5th Fleet N5, who was wanting us to slow down because they felt they had sufficient unrep coverage in the Gulf already. And I'm getting personals from Admiral Mullen saying, no, get here as fast as you can. So that was kind of an interesting thing. But we ended up doing high-speed for, oh, I can't remember, two or 3 days to get around the Arabian Gulf and the North Arabian Sea, and or through the Red Sea, North Arabian Sea, and into the Gulf. I have I guess one funny story that I'll end with here. I feel like I'm taking too much of your time, but I have one funny story here. We used to have, when we were, so we ended up continuing on that theme. We were in the Arabian Gulf for about 5 months and made many, many trips into Bahrain and into Jebel Ali in UAE to get fuel and stores and so forth and take it out to the fleet who were not getting all those port visits. But every time we would leave Bahrain, there was a big SEAL footprint there in Bahrain. And every time we'd leave, they like to do a practice takedown on the ship because it's not many Navy ships have the big high freeboard that Seattle did. And so they would sometimes come out and come up from a fast boat and grapple their way up the side of the hull. Other times they would come out by helicopter and they would start at the stern, and then they would bring a group, a little squad, or I'm not sure what they would call them, but 4 or 5 SEALs would come up each side of the ship. And what the instructions that they had given us was that they wanted us to have 5 or 6 crewmen that would be identifiable by just wearing a white t-shirt and shorts. And so anybody who was dressed like a sailor, they wouldn't fool with, but they wanted these 5 or 6 guys to be on the bridge. And as soon as the first one of them was aware of a SEAL being present, they're supposed to take off throughout the ship. And then the SEALs would go and hunt them down. And we were able to identify certain compartments to not go in by putting, a Post-it note, just a blank Post-it note on the door, and the SEALs wouldn't go in. But the story I wanted to tell you was we had a female lieutenant who was our navigator. And so she was the officer of the deck for this departure from Bahrain. And the SEALs did come aboard from the stern by helicopter. I knew it because I was sitting on the bridge wing watching it. She did not. She was in the bridge conning the ship as we went out to sea. They'd come along the side and up, and both sides burst into the bridge at the same time. And it's violent. I mean, if you've not seen one of these things happen, I mean, it's not, they're not using Sunday school language, and it is abrupt, and they basically, they're telling people, get face down right now. And they, with a lot of other words thrown in there. Anyway, it doesn't apply to Karen. She's in, I shouldn't have used her name. I didn't tell you her last name. But anyway, it didn't apply to my navigator, the conning officer, because she was in uniform. It only applied to whoever was there in the white t-shirt. But I looked over and my conning officer was on the deck. So I, brought her up, said, okay, let's stop that. We're still navigating the ship to get it underway. Anyway, I always enjoyed that story because she was the nicest person, and she was a very, very effective navigator for us. And but caught her off guard that day. So I think I'll leave it there. I don't know if anyone has any questions for me about my time. I was in Seattle from November '95 until October of '97.
So, Captain, they started doing those drills, at least during the time I was on board, in the Red Sea. So as they were preparing for boarding ships in the northern Red Sea, they practiced on board USS Seattle, and I do recall having a Navy SEAL scare the bejesus out of myself as well.
Yeah.
And I was also navigator at the time, but it was they have a way of being quite intimidating when there's an M16 pointing at you.
Well,
So,
yeah, and a spotlight on the end of their rifle and what have you. It's shocking if you've never seen it before. It's just shocking. And
I
it
never
happens
want to
in
see
1
it again.
second.
It does.
Yeah.
I would be on the ground I'd be on the deck as well. So that was a little after our time, but I see that at least during those times there was still some ship handling skills being shown at sea. I think in the in the last decade or so, I'm sensing that ship handling skills need to be worked on again. But I kind of like the maneuvering you were doing there, pretending to be a small boy.
Well, yeah, and we did. I can just remember countless man overboard drills, anchoring drills. We did a lot of gunnery drills. We would throw tri-wall boxes into the water in the Arabian Gulf and get the 50 cals and the M46s and what have you, and just blaze away at the thing and doing loops around, circles around that with the ship, and it was a lot of fun, and it was kind of spectacular to see as you did it at sunset, where you could start to see the tracers.
I don't know, Mike, and we didn't have any of that fun. I don't remember doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we used to throw Oscar over every now and then and go get him. I
Who were
remember
You
you
don't
shooting
shoot
at?
Oscar though.
We used to shoot up the pallets though too, on the 50 pallets, and with the M60s too.
Very good. I guess sometimes I was below decks.
You were on watch that day.
Apparently. I think as officer of the deck, I should know we were shooting something. I actually have a memory. We have to go way back to early on in was it 89, 88. We were in Whiskey Anchorage when the Iowa came by after the explosion. We were trying to offload some ammunition. Is this in my memory, or am I going crazy? Mike, were you there for that?
I do remember the Iowa had the explosion on their gun turret, but I'm not sure that it went by.
So
I was at SWAS when that happened. Tom Ryer, I see you on there. Were you on board when that happened?
Tom had to jump. I think Tom had to jump. I think what happened is there's a gap between when you guys got there and when I was on board a few months earlier. So we had done some pulling in some ammunition, and we had gone into Whiskey Anchorage. Captain Jim, is that in my memory that they were at full dress ship and the 3 or 4 survivors were on the gun?
It could be. I can't remember that myself, but I do remember the Iowa. In fact, a friend of mine was a CO at the time, I think. So it must have been at that time when they came by, and it was after the accident.
Yeah. Yes, sir. So the one of the new people that has just communicated with us in the Veterans Association is the old bosun from when we were preparing to leave Virginia and go to New Jersey, and Van Vliet was the bosun back then, and was it Rick?
Rick Van Vliet.
So as we departed, I think he stayed on the pier, and we headed north. Is that how I recall? Or was it just So the following that, the next big memory was when we got the little phone call that said go back to Virginia and load out for Desert Storm, and our quick run into Jersey, grab everybody else, and then say goodbye. That was a quick turnaround there, as I recall. So I know we could probably have a whole call just about the Desert Shield, Desert Storm time. So,
I just wanted to tell Captain Tolbert when we were in Halifax and you guys went over to those homes in St. Margaret's Bay, a couple of us JOs did make it into Halifax, and we had a great time, just so you know that.
I don't know. I wasn't going to say anything. I didn't see any families. I was out in town.
I don't doubt that at all.
I think there had to be an extra stripe to see a family. I think we all made it to downtown.
Yeah. So I have a question for Captain Tolbert. So Captain Tolbert, when we were on board, there was this rumor running around that when you were in Vietnam, you stole a Jeep with Roger Starbuck. Is that true?
I did steal the Jeep, but it wasn't with Roger. And Roger's a good friend of mine because I played baseball with him at the academy. Right. But I did. We weren't actually in Vietnam. We were in the Philippines, And
Okay.
we'd gone up to the Naval Air Station, and we couldn't get transportation back, so we borrowed a Jeep.
Nice. So CO Tolbert was the CO when we left Norfolk, heading over to Desert Shield, correct?
Trafton.
During that time, I was
Trafton.
Yeah, I was Trafton because I was Commodore of Cerberon 4 at that
Okay.
for Desert Storm.
Okay, no. Okay, got it. I remember I was the phone talker on the bridge to all the mooring stations, and we were making preps to leave Norfolk, obviously after pulling in and loading up. And my family, being from Virginia Beach, was on the pier. My then girlfriend, now wife, with my mother and my father. My father had a gigantic American flag on the pier, and I'd already manned my station there on the bridge wing as a phone talker, for the conning officer. And I remember the CO at the time, I guess then Captain Trafton, and I'm waving at my family, and he said, Seaman Falk, that's your family? I was like, yes, sir. He said, well, why don't you, we're still, we're making preps. It's still going to be another 3 hours before we get underway or something like that. He said, go down there and see him, bring him on the deck, or, bring him on the quarterdeck. So he allowed him to come on the quarterdeck and give me I think it was about another 30 minutes time with him. So that was pretty cool.
Very good.
Bosun Peed.
He was first lieutenant.
First lieutenant.
Okay. Because I served with him on the Suribachi when I first went in back in the early 80s.
He was first lieutenant when we lost the sailor, and as I recall now, he passed away a couple years back, right?
That's what I heard as well. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, he taught me quite a bit when I was a young sailor of about 17.
We all learned a few lessons from the first lieutenant.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I had
Especially on
quite
the
a
JO side.
Yes. Yeah, it's too bad he wasn't still around. I would have loved to have talked to him.
I think we had Bosun, was the Portuguese fellow from Fall River.
Luis Bernardo.
Bernardo. So he's
Bernardo,
actually
yeah.
came to the last event, and I blanked on his name. So he's starting to come to some Seattle events. So if we have our reunion next year, the Bosun should be there for that. Trying to get more people.
Bernardo lives here in Jacksonville, and I see him every now and then. We go out to dinner and say hello, catch up. We also have another bosun. I think the bosun that followed him, Gary Haygood, who also lives here in Jacksonville. If any of you remember him, he was on Seattle, I think, for 4 years, starting about 92 or 3.
You might ask Gary if he thinks he can still get into Lynn Haven Inlet.
Well, the sandbars kind of move around, so yeah.
It's actually, if you go straight from the marker to the inlet, if you go straight, there's 1 foot of water at whenever the, the chart is made. 1 foot of water. You have to dog leg in there, which I only know because of that night.
So is Gary the guy that ran it aground?
He happens to be, yes.
Oh, I've got some good ammunition. Thank you very much.
Oh yeah, he'll deny. No, he won't deny. I bet he won't.
We'll be having a discussion. We were both working in a shipyard. I was a technology guy, and he was the rig chief for the shipyard. And I'll be talking to him about that.
Should.
Craig, I don't know if this is a story from when you were CO or if it was Tolbert. We were seeing Anchor Detail going into Virginia, and there was a submarine in the channel going in, and we were coming in from 2 different angles, and we wanted to get in front of them. And you could almost see mud coming off the channel behind us as we were making way to get in, to be in front of them. And I don't know if this was just in my memory as navigator, since I was terrified, or Yeah, did this really happen?
Yeah, it really happened. And, there's a phenomenon with fat ships that you have to be aware of. It's called squat. And when you get in a little bit of shallow water and you're going really fast, the stern kind of pops down a little bit. And so you draw a couple feet more than you normally do. So it wouldn't be uncommon to be kicking up a little bit of mud and
We did win that, though.
5 feet of water.
All right, so
but that submarine fell astern eventually.
yes, she did. Where she belonged. All right.
Hey,
So
gentlemen, I'm sorry.
Go.
I have to get off the call. This is Anthony Folkin. I apologize. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you guys and share some of my memories. Captain Malmer, I appreciate your comments on the Potter situation incident. And I guess I just want to leave with one thing, as I'm sure you all feel, and where our Navy is at today in comparison to really how we worked back in the day. I mean, the fond memory for me coming up in First Division, and trying to talk to sailors today and letting them know what life was like back in the day. First Division, I was on a rig team. I was on the underway watch, sweepers before breakfast. You get off a rig team at 2000 and you're on, underway watch bill at midnight, and try to explain that. And it's like, hold on, you didn't get certain number of sleep, or they wouldn't allow you to do this. It was a lot of hard work, but it was definitely rewarding and a lot of great memories for me. But I do have to get to another meeting, so I really appreciate you guys' time, and I apologize once again for coming in and interrupting the way I did. I wasn't sure how the meeting was set up, but I do thank you and I appreciate it, and hopefully I look forward to some future opportunities as well.
Anthony, thanks for jumping in.
All right.
So I would be remiss if I didn't give Rich's speech, right, Vic, on the check the USS Seattle Veterans Association page on Facebook for updates from Rich Toma. David apologizes that he's on a move this week, moving closer to his children. We are looking to continue to have people get together and talk. We'll continue to have these phone calls since we're not going to have a reunion this fall. And the Seattle Museum that we were working on already put our documentation out. Those of us that would dare risking going to Seattle at this point. But the Seattle Museum memorabilia is out and in the Puget Sound area there. We have a shipmate right from the area, right, Vic and Bill?
Yeah, we do have somebody.
Hopefully we can get some video of it.
Well, they've decided to postpone setting everything up until we're ready to come out for the reunion out there. But I've sent a note to the curator and asked her to go ahead and put it together so that we can have Charles Rood go over and film it, take pictures, like a documentary thing for us, because we don't know for sure when the plan to go back to Seattle is.
And I think we're still discussing what next year would be, or do we already have a location for next year?
We're close to having a location for next year.
You miss one board meeting and you miss everything, guys. That's what happens. So I know we've gone 90 minutes now. I am honored to have tried to coordinate as best I could rudimentarily to keep this. We lost Tom Ryer. I will say that I served with a bunch of ensigns that all made 06 and I left at 03 and retired. So if you're ever in the Hanover, New Hampshire area and visiting Dartmouth with anybody, I am up here and would give you the dime tour of Dartmouth College. And I greatly appreciate everybody being on tonight. And if there's questions that come up after the fact and you can't reach somebody, go on to the website. Our email addresses are there, and we'll get people connected if there's things you want to say. Is there anybody want to have other final comments?
Good job, Dan.
Dan, you did a great job.
Dan.
I only had one drink.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, everybody. It was a beautiful night.
Great
Great
job.
stories.
Thank you.
Good to see you all.
Good night.
Everybody stay well.
Good
Bye-bye.
seeing you. Bye.
Yeah.